The sky above was bruised purple, torn apart by fire. At the center of it all, a man clad in battered armor, his crimson cloak ripped and blackened. His hands clutched a broken sword. The pages turned themselves, their edges cutting through the silence like blades. Arin's eyes widened as the ink rose from the parchment, forming visions before him. He was no longer in the library. He stood upon a battlefield drenched in smoke and ash. The rain had stopped, or perhaps it never rained down here. Arin could no longer tell. The library stretched endlessly in every direction, its shelves like the ribs of some colossal beast. The lantern in his hand flickered, its small flame fighting against the swallowing dark. His steps echoed, too loud, too lonely. He paused, clutching the strap of his satchel, a familiar habit. What had been inside it? A book, a trinket, something from his childhood. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to remember. But there was nothing, only silence where a memory should have been. Arin whispering, her face. Why can't I? The girl. The one he used to laugh with beneath the willow trees, his only friend. Her voice was gone, erased like chalk in the rain. Arin shivered and forced his feet to keep moving. He had already paid the price for opening one book. He had sworn not to repeat it, yet the shelves seemed to draw him onward, deeper into the labyrinth, deeper into temptation. The air thickened. Dust hung like mist, glittering in the faint glow of his lantern. The whisper of pages stirred around him, though no hand touched them. Books spoke here, humming like restless bees, voices of lives waiting to be rewritten. And then he saw it. On a pedestal of black stone, isolated from the shelves, lay a single tome. Its leather was cracked, deep crimson like dried blood, and bound with tarnished clasps of iron. The title was almost erased. But when Arin leaned closer, the letters burned faintly in the dark. The warrior who lost the war. His hand hovered above it. Cold air spilled from the book's edges, as though the pages held winter itself. The lantern trembled in his grasp. Whisper from the shelves. Do not open it. Arin froze, his pulse hammering. He had heard the voices before, but never so clear, never so close. The words came from nowhere and everywhere at once, rattling in his skull. But the book called to him, stronger than fear, stronger than memory. He remembered the sick child from before, the girl who had lived when she should have died. That miracle had cost him his mother's face. Was he truly ready to pay again? And yet, his fingers touched the crimson leather. The clasps unlatched with a metallic sigh, as though the tome had been waiting for this moment. Arin opened the book. The library dimmed, the air shifted, and the first words of a soldier's tragedy bled across the page. The pages turned themselves, their edges cutting through the silence like blades. Arin's eyes widened as the ink rose from the parchment, forming visions before him. He was no longer in the library. He stood upon a battlefield drenched in smoke and ash. The stench of iron and blood clogged the air, and the cries of men echoed endlessly. The sky above was bruised purple, torn apart by fire. At the center of it all, a man clad in battered armor, his crimson cloak ripped and blackened. His hands clutched a broken sword. His face was carved by years of war, lined with scars, his eyes hollow but burning with stubborn resolve. This was the general, once celebrated, once unstoppable, now only a shadow of victory's ghost. Narrator's voice echoing in Arin's mind. He led them to the last stand, the final charge against an enemy greater than they had ever known. He fought not for crown nor coin, but for the promise he made to his people. Arin's vision shifted. Soldiers rallied behind the general, their numbers pitiful compared to the endless tide of enemies that swarmed the valley. Shields cracked, spears splintered, and one by one the men fell. The general roared above the clash, refusing to yield, refusing to let despair claim him. But no roar could turn back the tide. A horn blasted, a wall of armored riders thundered down, crushing what remained of his army. The ground trembled as hope bled out beneath hooves and steel. The general fell to one knee, his sword shattering against the enemy's blade. Blood spilled across the dirt, mixing with the countless nameless dead. He had lost, his men gone, his vow broken. And in that moment, Arin felt the general's despair. He staggered, clutching the lantern tighter. His heart raced with emotions that weren't his own loss. Guilt, the unbearable weight of thousands of lives extinguished. The vision sharpened. The general's lips moved. His voice cracked through the ruin. General weak, whispering, if only I could turn it back. Arin's breath caught. The words struck him like a chain. The book trembled in his hands. The ink seemed to ripple, waiting, daring him to do it. To read the words aloud, to unmake what was written, to grant the general the victory he had been denied. But he knew the price. He knew what it had cost him last time, and still, his lips parted. Arin's voice trembled at first, the words sticking in his throat, but the book's ink pulsed, glowing faintly, urging him on. And so he began to read aloud. The battlefield stirred. Where once the general lay broken, his body rose. His sword, shattered in defeat, knit itself whole again, gleaming like silver flame. The scattered soldiers around him, those who had fallen, drew breath once more. Their eyes opened, filled with fire and loyalty. The enemy charge slowed, faltered, as though time itself hesitated. Arin's voice grew stronger, the words rolling from the page like thunder. Arin reading. The general did not fall. His men did not yield. Against the storm they rose. Against despair they struck, and where hope had been buried, it blazed anew. The air split open with the clash of steel. The enemy tide was driven back. Shields locked, spears surged forward, and the general's army roared as one. Victory impossible, unthinkable was theirs. The general lifted his sword high, his crimson cloak snapping in the wind. His men cheered, voices shaking the sky. They hailed him as savior, as legend reborn. And the book trembled violently in Arin's hands. The library moaned, wood and stone creaking as though the shelves themselves resisted the rewriting of destiny. Lanterns flickered, shadows twisted, and the whispers rose into a howl. Voices from the shelves. Stop, stop, stop. But Arin couldn't stop. His hands shook, his heart pounded, but the words spilled forth until the last line of the page burned away, sealing the general's triumph into history. And then a tearing pain ripped through his skull. Arin gasped, clutching his head. Memories slipped like sand between his fingers. He reached for something, someone inside his mind. A laugh, a promise, a face beside his own beneath the willow trees. Gone, erased. He fell to his knees, the crimson tome slamming shut in front of him. The general's victory was written, but Arin's own story was breaking. He pressed his palm against his temple, desperate to anchor the fleeing fragments of memory. There had been a friend, a girl, no, a boy. He couldn't even remember which. Only laughter under a willow, a voice carried on the summer wind. It slipped further, dissolving into nothingness. Arin, hoarse whisper, wait. What was your name? Don't leave me. But there was no answer. Only the restless murmur of books, their voices cold and merciless. The shadows along the shelves shifted like watching eyes. The library knew what he had done. It had taken its price, and it was not finished with him. Arin dragged himself upright, breathing hard. His hand brushed the crimson tome. For a moment he almost shoved it back onto the pedestal, but instead he pulled it close, clutching it as if holding onto a lifeline. The general's victory had cost him dearly, yet some part of Arin felt compelled, as though each rewritten story drew him deeper into a role he had not chosen, but could not escape. The lantern flickered again, throwing his shadow long across the floor. His outline wavered, thinner, less certain, like a man half forgotten already. Narrator soft, ominous. The general's war was won, but the boy's war had only just begun. Arin whispered into the dark, his voice trembling. Arin, I won't forget you. Whoever you were, I won't. But the words felt hollow. The name was gone, the memory erased, and the shelves whispered back, like 1,000 unseen mouths. Liar. The lantern sputtered, then steadied. Arin swallowed hard, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward into the dark once more. The library stretched ahead, endless and waiting, and somewhere in its depths, another story was calling his name. W84 next part.